The topics which will be discussed today is our roles, or rather, I can say IAM roles. Okay, we will be working with AWS CLI. Okay, we will be working with MFA, that is multi-factor authentication, where we will be integrating our AWS with third-party utility softwares. Okay. Once that is done, we will be describing, or rather discussing, about RDS, that is Relational Database Service. Okay. We will create an RDS instance. Okay. We will access the RDS instance, and we will be seeing backup policies that can be defined for RDS. Okay, and last, we will be having the hands-on labs. Okay, so this will be the topics that we will be covering up today. Okay, so to start with, let me start with IAM roles. Okay, now when we start with IAM, before starting with IAM rules, there is one thing which I want to discuss is, yesterday we have discussed about policies, right? Okay, so can any one of you just give me a brief functionality of a policies, where we can use these policies, whether it's an AWS managed policy or maybe a custom policy, where we can use this?
You can use it for users.
Okay, and we can only use this for users, Avijita?
And no, it can be used for as well as groups also.
Okay, so we can use this policies or the permission sets, and we can give permissions to users and groups. Okay, now as with policies we can give permissions to users and groups, with respect to roles we can give permissions to resources or instances. So when I say resources and instances, so we can give permissions to any resource and any instance, starting from EC2. We can give roles. We can assign roles to an S3 bucket. We can assign roles to any RDS instances. We can assign roles to a DynamoDB instances. We can also assign roles to any what I say is any ALBs or NLBs. So all kind of resources and instances, if we want to give some permissions, we can use roles. Okay. Now to understand what this the functionality of roles, to give you a clear scenario, let me quick go to my annotation mode. Okay. So suppose your company is having a requirement wherein you will be creating a website, and those websites, or maybe let me give you a classic example. You have been given a task or building a website for a particular education and institutions. Okay, and during the time of admission, that particular website will be used for taking admissions, where the candidates will be uploading their mark sheets, and they will be uploading their pictures. They will be uploading their all the credentials that is required for completing the admission. Okay, so in that case what we have to do is that we have to define one EC2 instance. Okay, we have to define one EC2 instance. We have to develop a website here. Okay, and then on this particular website it will be giving options to the candidates where they can upload their documents. Okay. Now, if a website is giving access to upload documents, or if you create a website to access or to upload documents, what is the most important thing that is required, that you need to store this particular documents? Can anyone tell me?
Can you repeat the question? Because I got some
You need storage. So my question was, Vijita, like, if this website will serve as a platform where the candidates will be uploading their files and documents, so what will be the base of uploading those files and documents? So we need a storage, right? So the files and documents, once uploaded in this particular website, this files and documents needs to be stored into a bucket or into a S3 bucket, or we can call it as a storage, right? But
need a database also.
yeah, so if your application is, if your website needs a database also, that also we need a DB as well. Okay, fine, we need a DB as well. Okay, now even when we are talking about this DB, so this DB also needs to be stored into somewhere, right? So we need to define a storage space for the DB, and we also need to define a storage space to collect those uploaded files. Okay.
Right.
So can you integrate a website directly into a storage device?
We need permission to do that.
Exactly. We need a permission to do that. So what we have to do is, we have two options. Either we can directly call the storage from the website, okay, or we can attach the storage to this particular EC2 instance and then let the website save all those files in this particular storage, right? Now, to access each and every resources, you need to have a proper permission. So if this EC2 instance wants to access the storage, so there will be a IO ops that will be happening in this particular storage. Okay, that means input output operations will be happening in the storage, or rather I should say, there will be a read write operation that will be happening in the storage, right? So once there is a read write operation, so this EC2 instance or this website needs to have a full access to this particular S3 bucket. Okay, but we have seen yesterday that permissions can only be given to users and groups. Like we have given Amazon S3 full access permission. We have created customized permission where no one can delete some data from the storage, or maybe no one can delete a database instance or a table from a database, right? But how can a virtual machine, or maybe a static website, or maybe a dynamic website can have access to this S3 device? This is the storage. So there needs to be an access. Okay. So there, actually the function of these roles comes into picture. So roles is nothing but we will be creating certain permissions, we will be giving certain permissions, and we will be attaching, suppose we will create a particular role X. Okay, we will give full access permission of this particular S3 bucket. Okay, and then we need to assign, now how this EC2 instance will understand that I have a full permission on this S3 bucket. We will then assign this particular permission or this role under this EC2 instance. Okay, so once the EC2 instance will try to access the storage, automatically the permission set will be checked, and based on the permission that has been given by the policy or by the role policy, those accessibility will be given to the EC2 instance or to the website. Is it clear what is the function of a role?
Yes.
Okay, so in that case, let me move to the console, how you can define a role. So to define a role as well, you need to go to IAM. Okay, so before I go to IAM, let us just see whether we have a EC2 instance already defined or not, because we need to assign this to a EC2 instance. Okay. So we have three EC2 instances, one for WordPress, one for Joomla, and another is a Red Hat Linux instance, which is currently in running state. Okay. So what we will do is that we will create a EC2 S3 EC2 bucket policy. We will give full access permission for that particular, for accessing that S3, and then we will assign that particular policy to this RHL EC2. Okay, so this RHL VM. Okay, so in order to do that, let's go to the IAM. Okay, in the IAM, go to roles. So let me delete any roles which is currently present. The role name is AWS S3 role EC2. Okay. Now let us create a particular role for this EC2 instance. So in order to create a particular role, just click on create role. Okay. So now, since I already told you is that policies are permissions given to users and roles are permissions given to resources and instances. So can you see, you can see all the 185 resources or instances which currently AWS is working with. So you have all the instances which is there. You have the API gateway, you have the backup, chatbot, you have DynamoDB, you have EC2, you have guard duty, you have EMR containers, everything is there. All the resources are there where you can actually assign a
services.
These are the services. These are the, you can see, these are the services.
EC2. Oh, EC2.
No. EC2 is a separate service. You can see there is a service known as EC2 also. EC2 is a separate service. These are all the other services where you can actually create a role or assign a permission with. Okay.
So is there a difference between a service and the instance? Like
service is the platform standing on which you can create an instance. Okay.
Yes.
So this
Yes.
is an instance. Okay. And the
Okay.
service is the EC2.
Okay.
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 Now, so what we are planning is that we are planning that. Okay.
Just repeat one second. Instance and sorry.
Service is the platform standing on which you can create instances. Okay. So EC2 is the service. Standing on that particular EC2 service, you can create multiple instances. Like you can create a Windows instance, Linux instance, Oracle instance. S3 is the main service. Standing on that, you can create buckets. You can create Elastic buckets. You can create Glacier buckets and other buckets as well. Okay. So is it clear? Now, first we have to select the trusted identity. So what is the trusted identity? You can use the AWS service which is currently there in your organization. Okay. You can also attach another AWS account. Okay. So I have already shown you that for each and every AWS account, there is an account ID. Okay. So you can use this account ID and you can match all those. You can just put this account ID here and you can fetch all the instances which is deployed on that particular AWS account. Okay. You can also create, like if you have a if there is an identity provider or maybe if you are using an OpenID Connect, or maybe you are using a Cognito access, then you can put those identity provider access out here, and you can also fetch all the trusted, all the identity providers or all the services which is hosted in that Cognito ID. Okay. And if you are having a particular corporate directory, now this is though these three parts are not part of this associate training, but let me give you a small idea. In a particular organization, there are many applications which a user is using, right? So the administrator or the IT manager starts develops applications and publish those applications in the production. Okay. Now, if you want that, there should be a role and permission defined in the cloud. Okay. And that role and permission should be propagated in your on-premise applications. So you need to create a SAML2 federation with that of your on-premise. So the communication will be like this. So if this is your on-premise AD, or maybe an authentication server, or maybe an server which is hosting the application. Okay. This is the internet, and this is AWS. Okay. So in order to, this is the internet and this is AWS. So in order to connect your AD with that, or on-premise applications with that of the cloud, the first thing that you need to set, you will have to set a VPN, which we will be coming when we will be discussing about VPC. We have to create a virtual private network between your on-premise and cloud. Okay. Then we have to deploy a policy out here. Okay. Do the authentication based on the SAML2 federation services. So once you are using any operating system, which can be a server level like Windows, or you are using a Red Hat Linux server, so you can create federations on those servers, use that particular federation authentication, and based on that authentication you can deploy any permission, or you can propagate any permission created in a cloud to your on-prem Active Directory or on-prem environment. Okay. So is it clear how we can actually configure a SAML authentication?
Yes, that means you need to create a federation.
Yeah, exactly. You need to create a federation. You need to create a trusted authority between your on-premise and with that of your cloud. Based on the trusted authority and with the federation authentication, that is SAML 2.0 federation, you can actually do it. Okay. Now, since we don't have this kind of environment in our lab, so let me show you the role policies based on the AWS services that we are having. Okay. So what we will be doing is that, if you remember my last annotation that I have shared, we need to create an S3 bucket, okay, or we need to create an EC2 instance and attach or give a permission to access that EC2 instance to a S3 bucket. Okay. So for that, the use case, let me choose EC2. Okay. Next, go to permissions. Now the policies will be assigned to EC2, and what EC2 will do, EC2 will fetch the data or get the data or put the data into that S3 bucket, right? So that means the permission for which we need to give a full access permission is for the S3, right? So we can search S3 here, and we can give Amazon S3 full access. Okay. You can also add any custom policy out here. Yesterday we have created a S3 deny write policy. Okay. So we can also add any S3 related policies out here, which can be a custom policy. Okay. We have attached a permission. Next, go to tags. Okay. We can create a tag as already discussed yesterday. Click on review, give the name, give the role a name, So we can give as EC2 access S3. Okay. Role description: allow EC2 instance to call AWS service on your behalf. Okay. So you can also give allow EC2 to access S3 bucket for get, comma, put and del. Okay. So now you can review it. This is my role name. The role is actually assigned, will be assigned to a EC2 instance, and that particular EC2 instance will be having an access to the Amazon S3 full access policies. Okay, that means this EC2 instance will be having a full access to this particular S3 bucket. Okay. Now click on create role.
Abhijit, I've got one question.
Yeah, sure.
If you don't configure the permission boundary,
Yeah.
is there any problem? Will
No,
there
there
be
is
any
no problem. No, there is no problem. So permission boundary, as I told you yesterday, that permission boundary is a preset boundary which is set by the admins so that other root users or admin users cannot change that. Like you have set a permission boundary for a particular group, that these are the 4 permissions which will be assigned and hard coded to this group. Any new permissions or any new policy sets will not be allowed in this particular group. So you can create a permission boundary. So any other root user or any other admin user cannot create or cannot attach any new permission to this particular group. So permission boundary is actually not mandatory, because there are other things with the help of which we can create that. Okay. So now your EC2 access permission S3 is now created. So now what we have to do is that we have to attach this particular permission to our web server. Okay. To attach that, let's go to our EC2 console. Okay. Let's go to the instances. Select the instance that you want to add. Okay. Right click the instance, go to instance settings, and there is an option of attach or replace IAM role. Click on this. If you have already a EC2 role created, you will see that particular EC2 role out here. So this is the role which we created right at this moment, EC2 access perm S3. Select this, click on apply, and now the IAM role is operation is succeeded. So what we have done right at this moment, we have given a access permission that this particular EC2 instance can now access any S3 instance which is actually created within this particular region. Okay. So right at this moment, once you create an S3 instance, so this particular EC2 can actually call your S3 bucket, and it will be getting a full access permission. Is it clear?
Yeah, Abhijit, this is Abhijit here.
Yeah.
The one question, like in this case, as you have shown here, like right now, so we can add this kind of IAM role when an EC2 instance is already running state.
Yeah, so you can actually
also
see.
apply that, right?
You can actually see that the EC2 instance is in running state, and I have
Yeah,
attached
right,
this
right.
permission. And the sweetness
Right,
of
right.
AWS is that you don't need to restart this particular instance in order to get this policy applied.
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
Okay.
Great.
Once you
Yeah,
attach
thank
this
you.
particular IAM role, this policy is automatically applied to all the applications, all the websites, all the database which is actually stored under this EC2 instance. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So this is what IAM role is all about. I will be giving you a much more elaborated policy diagram once we will do the S3 part. Okay, in our coming sessions, we will be showing you guys how to create an S3 bucket, how to create a policy there, and from there I will create a small HTML code where that HTML will try to pull the data from the S3 bucket, and it will list the data, and then there will be another command where there will be a delete request that will be sent from the code to the S3 bucket, and we will define an IAM policy where the deletion will not be applicable, means it will be denied, and we will see the logs. So these things we will be doing once we will be showing you the S3 bucket creation. So any questions regarding IAM roles? Great.
Abhijit, my video got stuck actually that time when you started the configuration. Okay. So
I am showing you again.
Okay. Just from where to start, I'll pick it up later.
Yeah, okay. So to create a particular role, you have to go to IAM and roles, then go to create role, click on create role. Okay. Select the service as EC2 or whatever may be the service that you want to create an IAM role for. EC2.
Yeah.
Go to permissions. Select the service for which you want to give a permission. Okay. Suppose I want to give a permission for Lambda. I have selected a role AWS Lambda full access. Click on next, click on review, give it a permission as AC AWS Lambda hyphen EC2 perm role. Okay. Click on create role.
Actually, I just want to see where we are just attaching it with the instance.
Yeah. Once this is created, go to your EC2 console. Okay. Click on the instances. So you will see the list of all the instances that is there. Select the instance that you want to tag with. Okay. Just right click it. Go to instance settings. There is an option of attach replace IAM role. Click on this role, and you will find all the predefined roles which you have already created. Like I want to attach AWS Lambda EC2 role, and then just apply it.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Now.
Okay.
It is very user friendly to work on a GUI. It is very user friendly to work on a GUI. But in a big production environment where you will be maintaining like hundreds and thousands of instances, and you will be working with like 50,000 or maybe 1 lakh of users, it will be a headache for you to working in GUI. Okay. So at that point of time, the only option which can save your energy and time and your devotion is AWS CLI. That is the CLI console, the command line interface console. Okay. So in order to use AWS CLI, there are two options with the help of which you can actually use it. One, you can use it from the console itself. Okay. From the console itself, you can just click on Cloud Shell, and like I showed you yesterday, you can just click on Cloud Shell, and it will actually create you a AWS CLI instance. Okay, so it will provision you a AWS CLI instance. Okay, so you can actually work on this, but for layman users, for developers, there will be users where they will be only having programmatic access. Okay. Now, can anyone tell me what programmatic access is all about? Produt, Amitabh,
Access key and secret keys.
pardon?
Accessing AWS environment via access key and secret key.
Yeah, exactly. So accessing the AWS environment via the CLI with the help of an access key and a secret key is a programmatic access permission given to a user. Okay. So most of the users, like in my case, I can give you a real-time scenario. In my environment, in my client environment, we don't have any GUI access. We only have CLI access, and whatever the things that we want to do, we have to do it on a CLI. Because once you are doing it CLI, it will be much more faster, and you can get much more elaborative report when it comes to reporting. Okay. So you can just run AWS S3 LS. So I will show you the commands, don't worry. So we don't have any S3 or any bucket which is defined under this particular region. Okay. Under this particular region, we don't have any bucket. So for that reason, it is not giving me any instance list. Let me see if I can get something like this. Uh, uh,
By any chance, Linux commands can work over here, or
Unfortunately, Shorgojit, the entire AWS works on Linux only.
Linux, right? Okay.
Yeah. So the backend's bash system is
Got it.
Linux. The backend bash
Linux,
system is Linux.
So yeah. So it will work, right?
Yeah, it will work. So
Commands,
you can
Yeah,
see
yeah.
the command I have given, right? ls is list command.
Listing, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
Yes.
Now you can use this, but the main problem of using this is that you need to have a GUI access, right? Otherwise, you cannot create a Cloud Shell. Then how can you work on a Windows or maybe a Mac or maybe a Red Hat environment by in AWS from CLI? So doing that, you need to install the AWS CLI version. So you have all the versions. So you have the AWS CLI version for the Docker. You have the CLI version for Linux, macOS, and Windows. Okay. So I will share this. I think most of you is having the Windows machine. So I will share you this link from where you can download the the AWS CLI. Okay. So it's just a normal MSI package that will be downloaded. You can also use a command as msi exec.exe/I, and you can directly pull the CLI package from the site. Okay. So this is the command with the help of which you don't need to download anything. This command, you can run it in your command mode. Okay. You can run it in your command mode, and you can do it. You can directly call the function, or you can directly call the MSI package from the command mode. Okay. So once the AWS CLI is installed, how we can confirm that the AWS CLI is properly installed? Okay. So to do that, just open your command mode and type the command AWS ---- version. Once you write AWS ---- version, it will show you the current version which is currently in use. Okay. Now, this will show the version. Okay. But in order to do anything in AWS, you have to connect to the AWS console, right? So like if I use the command AWS S3 LS, See, it is giving an error, could not connect to the endpoint URL. Okay, that means you have to connect it. So in order to do it, let me do a small thing. Let me create a user. Let me give the name of the user as CLI admin. Okay, let me give it as a programmatic access. Okay, then next permission, let the user be part of the DB owners EC2 and all those three groups. Okay, next tags, next preview. Okay, create user. Now you have the access key ID and the secret code, secret access key right now. So let me download the CSV and let me show you how you can use this particular information to access the CLI. Let me open this. So here is the username, here is the access key ID, and here is the secret access key. Okay. Now in order to access with this particular user, okay, just go to the AWS CLI, type command AWS configure. Now see, there is already one user which is currently using the access key from my AWS session. So this is the access key ID, last 4 digit of the access key ID for that particular user. Now if you want to change this, just put the new access key ID out here. Okay, click on enter. It will ask the AWS secret access key. Put the secret access key here. Okay, now it will ask you a default region. Okay, now if you go to the console, these are the regions and these are the short codes which is there for the regions. Okay, so if you want to log in to North Virginia, so the location information will be US-East 1. Okay, if you want to locate in Ohio, the location will be US-East 2. Okay, so let me take it to US-East 2 only. US-East 2, enter. Now the default output format, you have to provide a default output format, means whether the output format will be in JSON, whether the output format will be in HTML, whether the output format will be in CSV, or whatever may be the format. But since you will be working with AWS commands, I have already shown you yesterday. Just a minute, guys. I have already shown you yesterday that AWS by default supports JSON. Okay, so let us put the JSON as the default output format. You are now connected. Okay, so now if I create, maybe for this user, let me create a S3 bucket. Okay.
So when the voice is not coming.
Yeah, I'm just creating the bucket so that I can show you the command. So now the bucket is created. Let's do the same command AWS S3 LS. So there is some problem with the connecting with this endpoint URL. So I have to check it. But this is the way you can actually work on S3 on AWS CLI. There are a host of commands with the help of which you can create all the, or you can have all the CLI commands here. I will share you this link so that any one of you who wants to navigate with CLI commands, you can use this link and you will find all the commands which are related to the instances. Okay, so like if you want to see what are the commands which is there for S3, you can just click it, so it will show you all the commands which are there which is related to S3. Okay, so all the commands are there. Okay, so this is the ls command. So once you give the command AWS ls is AWS S3 ls and then the bucket name, it will show you any files which is stored in this bucket. Okay, and if you give only the command AWS S3 ls, it will show you all the buckets which are currently present in that particular region. So this is the command AWS S3 ls. It will show you all the bucket names. Okay, so this is the way we can actually create, or this is the way we can actually use AWS CLI. So any questions or queries related to AWS CLI?
No, it's clear.
Okay, great.
Can't we use putty?
Yeah, we can use putty, but In that case, you have to give access to SSH port, number one. Number two, if you are want to access Linux-based platform or Linux-based EC2 instance, you can also use PuTTY on that. So for PuTTY, you need to have the .pem file which you need to create, and you need to download those .pem file and then use, because it will be having a secured access. So you have to use the PuTTY with the secured .pem file which is downloaded. So I will show you how once we will go with EC2 instances. I will show you how you can work with PuTTY. Okay, so this is clear. Next, so by now you guys know that once a AWS instance or once a AWS account is created, by default that account is having the root permission, okay, and IAM users, any IAM users can have an admin permission, okay. So if you want to give any IAM users the admin permission, you just have to go to the IAM console, select the users that you want to give permission. So maybe user 3 you want to give admin permission, just click on this user. Permission, click add permission. Okay. Click on attach existing policies. Just click on administrator access and click on next review and click on add permission. So now this particular user 3 is having administrative access. Okay. Now as per recommendation, since the admin and the root user can have access to all resources and all instances, it's not mandatory but definitely recommended to put a second level of security for this admin users or the root users. Okay. Now how the second level of security can be put? The second level of security can be put with a solution which is known as MFA or multi-factor authentication. Okay. So this multi-factor authentication can be it can be authenticated with virtual devices like MS Authenticator, Google Authenticator, AuthDB, and there are other things which I will show you in the list. And apart from that, if you have hardware authenticators like RSA, ASI, smart cards, so that can also be authenticated. Okay. So how can you enable a MFA or multi-factor authentication for a particular user? Let me show you that. To do that, just click the particular users, go to IAM, go to our users, click on the particular user and go to security credentials. Okay. Now see, just a minute. Okay, user 3 is already MFA enabled. Okay, so have just gone to user 2 whose MFA is not enabled. You can see that the assign MFA device is not assigned. In order to assign an MFA device, just click on manage. Okay, so you have three type of authentications. Okay, you have the virtual MFA devices, you have the U2F security key, and other hardware MFA devices. Please note that the MFA can be configured only on those devices which is supported by AWS. Okay, so you can just click on this link and you can see what are the MFA devices that are currently supported. So this is the MFA devices. This is for the hardware devices, okay, and this is for the virtual MFA application. So you have Authy, Duo Mobile, LastPass Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, and Google Authenticator. Okay, so only this can be connected with as an MFA device. Any other third-party utility software cannot be connected in AWS as a MFA authenticated device. Okay. So in order to do it, let's do it with a, since we don't have a hardware, let's do it with a virtual MFA device. Click on continue. Now so you can configure this MFA device with two ways. Either you can configure it from install it in your mobile. Okay. So if you have an Android or iPhone, you can just go to and click on Google Authenticator. So it will help you to install the Google Authenticator. Okay. Once the Google Authenticator is installed, if the user is present physically with you, you can just click on show QR code and the user can scan this QR code and can configure the MFA. Okay. And if the user is not present in front of you, you can just click on show secret key and you can mail the secret key to the user with the help of which he can configure. Okay. So since we have the QR code, so let us configure for this user to the MFA device. So I have the Google Authenticator installed here. Okay. So to do that, click on this. Okay. Scan this particular code and your, okay, so it is added. So you can see this is added. So for a Google Authenticator, this particular secret code gets expired every 30 seconds. Okay. And to activate this, you have to put two MFA codes. Okay. So click on this, it will be copied, put it here. We have to wait for 30 seconds for the next code to come. So just wait for 30 seconds. Okay, this is the next code, copy it, click on this, assign MFA. Okay, now the MFA is successfully assigned for this particular user. Okay, now let's open a incognito mode and let's see if this is possible.
Sir, this authentication code is swipeable or?
Karan, can you repeat it once?
Sir, these two codes are swipeable or repeated authentication is happening.
No, repeated authentication is happening. So every code will be valid for 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, a new code will be generated.
So once we done this authentication, then
You cannot use this. You cannot use this same authentication code with other logins. This is unique for the current session.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's just go to this console and try to log in with user 2. User 2, then I think I have given this password. Yes, it has asked me the MFA code. Now go back to my MFA, copy this code, put the MFA code here, click on submit, and the user logged in. So as I told you that MFA is not at all mandatory for all users, but MFA is definitely recommended for at least the root and the admin users. Okay. Now, since this user is a admin user, we have enabled MFA for this particular user. Every time the user logs in, so now if the user log out, sign out from this particular session, and again try to log in for another session, it will again ask the MFA. It will again ask the MFA. If you cancel it, the login will not happen. It will come back to your login page. So is it clear? Any questions related to MFA?
No.
Abhijita, any questions?
I have one question related to roles. Can I?
Yeah, sure. Sure. Tell me.
Okay. Okay. So while yesterday we saw that while creating, I mean, if you have to create a custom policy, you can do it from you can create a custom managed policy and assign to particular user or user group. What if I mean, I just want to understand if there will be any change when we define a custom policy for a role.
No, there will not be any change. It will be working as the same. So
Okay.
like you have defined roles from your AWS managed policy, same way you can define a custom policy for your role IAM roles as well.
Okay. Okay. I think a new that principle will be included over there.
Principle means?
Uh, okay, I'll check that. That's fine. That's fine. I understood that.
Okay.
Abhijit, how do we add the phone number in MFA?
See, you cannot add a phone number in MFA. So it's not like the MFA which you actually configure in Office 365 or in Azure. Okay. So Office
Okay.
365 and Azure use Microsoft Authenticator. Okay. Where you can configure a phone number or maybe an email ID. Uh, Suppose you don't have the authentication device with you, so you can ask a code, but AWS is very stringent on this, so there is no mobile number or there is no nothing you can actually configure. So I think you are well versed with this process of MFA, because in our organization we use this MFA devices, right? So at the
Yeah,
time of login to each and every application, we used to define MFAs. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Any question as of now?
No, we're good.
Okay. So we are more or less complete with these three. Now let's discuss about RDS or RDS instance, or you guys want some 10 minutes of break and then we can start with RDS as you wish.
That could be nice. Like, effective.
Okay, so let's take a 10 minutes break. Okay, and let's come after the break, and then we can discuss about RDS and other things. So we will be back after 10 minutes. Confirmation that we are back.
We are back, Abhijit.
Okay. So let's see, when I give administrator access policy to user, then I can view buckets using CLI, but when I attach Amazon S3 full access, then can't access Y, an error occurred, access denied when calling the list bucket operations, access denied. Okay. So Rishi, this you have to give other set of permissions in order to access S3. Now from administrator access, you can see all the buckets. The reason behind this, administrator is having a override permission on all the other permissions because administrator is by default act as a root. So you can access all the, or you can see all the S3 buckets with administrator access. But if you want to see the list of the buckets with a normal IAM user, then there are other sets of permissions which you need to provide, which we will be discussing once we will be discussing S3. Is it fine? Okay. So now let's go back to our whiteboard. So next what we will be discussing is we will be discussing about RDS, or what we call as relational database service. Okay. Now in a traditional environment, in an on-prem environment, what we have to do is that in order to deploy a particular database, whether it can be SQL, whether it can be MySQL, whether it is Oracle, whether it is Postgres, whether it is Sysbase, whatever may be the database that you want to deploy, what we have to do is that we have to provide a hardware for that. Okay. So we have to install the OS operating system. We have to install the application, that is the database software. We have to configure the entire database, whether it's whether it is SQL, whether it is Oracle. We have to configure it. We have to provide the corresponding license for that particular database. Okay, and not only that, we have to also think about, like, if this is the master database, we have to also think about a secondary database which will work as a secondary platform if the master database goes down. And we also have to think something about the backup of this particular database. So we need to provision a particular storage, and we need to define backup policies with the help of which this database backup is possible. That database backup can be done. Okay. Now, if we don't want to do all those things, that means if you don't want to configure a hardware, if you don't want to configure the backup policies, if you don't want to configure the storage and everything, then the thing which is required is relational database. Okay. Now, relational database are strictly relational database only doesn't work with database which is a NoSQL database. So if you are working with a NoSQL database, then you are not working with RDS. There is a separate database functions in AWS which is known as DynamoDB. So NoSQL database actually works with DynamoDB function. In case of RDS, we only work with those databases which is having a preset rules of functions and preset rules of tables and structures, which is found in MySQL, SQL Server, and Oracle, and other databases as well. Okay. Now, what happened in case of RDS? Let me just erase all those things. Okay. So how a relational database actually works. So once you want to configure a RDS, the same way you configure a database in on-premise, the RDS database is also configured like the same way. That means once you are deploying an RDS in AWS, by default you have to give the configuration for a server. for a EC2 instance, you have to say which network this EC2 instance will work. Okay, so which network this EC2 instance. So this is a EC2 instance. Okay, you have to define the network. You have to define the storage this database will use, and you also have to define the backup policies. Okay, but the sweetness of RDS is that if you want to find, or if you want to search this particular EC2 instance, or if you want to search this particular storage or network in your AWS EC2 console, or maybe the S3 console, you will not be able to find it, because you will only find this RDS instance, and rest to run this particular RDS instance, whatever the infrastructure that is required, that will be deployed in the backend, and you will not be able to find anything or any hardware or any configuration related to RDS, but you will be only having access to the relational database, and that's it. Okay, so once I will show you how to define a RDS instance, you will be able to find out how this thing actually works. Okay, not only that, this RDS instance, like yesterday I was actually talking about availability zones, and we are talking about regions, right? So from this RDS instance, or this from RDS configurations, you can also define availability zones. That means if you want to create a secondary instance, with the help of this availability zones, you can also configure the RDS instance in the availability zone, which will work as a secondary server. So once you define an availability zone, what the RDS instance will do, whatever the configuration of this EC2 that you have given, a similar instance will be deployed in your availability zone. And once the database once there is a read and write operation, means you start creating a database, you start creating tables, you start creating fields, all these things will be automatically replicated to the secondary instances. Okay, so at any point of time your primary instance goes down, the entire RDS traffic will be routed to your secondary instance, and the user will not be able to know that which particular instance this database is serving from. Okay, so this is the concept of RDS instance in AWS.
What about the below portion, whatever you have drawn in the rectangle shape, why it exists? I mean, why it basically stores?
It's actually stored in the AWS data center. AWS data center, the region that you are selecting to deploy this RDS, and let me give you an idea that RDS is a region specific service. That means any RDS, if you are deploying an RDS into Ohio or maybe a North Virginia, okay, you cannot access that particular RDS from other location. That means if you want to access this RDS from a Mumbai location, you will be unable to access it. So this is a specific service, or this is a specific service which is region specific.
That means that availability zone will be in that.
The availability zone will be within that region, or if you want a cross replication, means if you want a cross availability zone replication, that can also be configured. That means suppose
if my customer is from Mumbai, then I can configure in the Mumbai availability zone.
Yeah. So in your scenario, suppose you have deployed a RDS instance in North Virginia, okay, and you have different locations. Okay, so it is Mumbai, this is Tokyo, this is Frankfurt, this is London. Okay, now once you start going for a availability zone replication or data replication, what this RDS will do, it will create small instances over each and every regions. If you are enabling cross availability zone replications, it will deploy in each and every region, it will deploy a replica instance of this RDS. Okay. So when a North Virginia user will try to access the RDS instance, it will supply it from his RDS, from his nearest availability zone. Okay. And suppose maybe the RDS is actually deployed or actually getting access from Frankfurt. So then the user will not getting access to this North Virginia RDS instance, but it will be getting the access from the Frankfurt location only. Is it clear?
Yeah, fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Abhijit,
Yeah, tell me.
Abhijit, we have learned about regions, we have learned about availability zones. There is something called point, I mean,
Point of source.
edge locations.
Point
edge
of source.
locations.
Point of source.
Point of source.
Yeah.
What is that?
Okay. So, see, let me go back to my annotation mode. Now, this is the Mumbai data center, or this is the Mumbai region. Okay. Now, in each and every Mumbai region, or maybe, sorry, let me give you a much more idea. Suppose this is India location, okay, and in India locations we have 3 availability zones. One in Mumbai, second is in Hyderabad, and third is in Chennai. Okay. Now, point of source or edge locations are those locations which are nearest to the availability zones. Okay. Suppose you have Mumbai data centers and the nearest availability zone or the edge location can be maybe Hyderabad, or there basically point of source or edge locations are 2 types of locations. One edge location is defined in the same availability zone and the other edge location is defined in the same region. Okay. So in India, like if you go for a broader sense, this is APAC. Under APAC, there are different data centers. Like in Tokyo, we have China, we have Singapore, we have other locations as well. We have Malaysia. Okay. So when what AWS has done is that they have created multiple point of sources. Okay. So there are, for each and every data center, there will be 2 point of source or 2 edge locations which are defined. One edge location will be defined in the same availability zone, that means in India, and the second edge location will be defined or will be deployed in the nearest availability zone. So it can be Tokyo, it can be Singapore, it can be Malaysia. So this is just to give you a redundancy over redundancy. If your edge location, one of the location goes down, the data will be first followed to the nearest edge location, okay, within the availability zone. So it can be forwarded from Hyderabad or maybe Chennai. But your entire availability zone or entire region goes down, then automatically the data will be supplied from the nearest edge location, which can be Tokyo, which can be Singapore, or which can be Malaysia. Is it clear?
Yep. Okay. Edge location is nothing but the cache, right?
Yeah, it's a kind of cache. It's a kind of cache, but it's not like that. Not like our application cache, or not like our DNS cache, or maybe our hardware cache. Okay. So edge location is having. That's the reason it is not only called as edge location, but it is also called as point of source (POS). So these edge locations will be having the exact replicated data which is present here. So all the edge
location will be configured only those places where the replication has been done.
Where the replication should be done. That's an internal redundancy where AWS, because AWS is giving you a 99.9% uptime guarantee. Okay, so in order to give a 99% uptime guarantee, they have to create edge locations and point sources and redundancy over redundancy. Now here the redundancy of Mumbai data center may be Hyderabad data center maybe Chennai. Okay, but if the entire availability goes down due to some natural calamity, maybe there is an earthquake, for that reason the entire availability zone is out. So then it will work on the next POS of the next point of source, which can be Tokyo, which can be China, it can be SG, or it can be Malaysia. That is totally defined by AWS.
Sir, can you elaborate this RDS accessibility? Which location?
RDS accessibility location means?
Means like the Ohio, I will give a configure.
Yeah.
Then how to access? Then when I will location it will be changed.
That means you want to say that if you have deployed one database in Ohio, how you can access the database location of other regions.
Yes, sir.
So that's more or less. Just a minute. That is very much simple. So suppose you have deployed a database in Ohio or North Virginia. Okay, there are other locations where you can also deploy database. Okay, so in order to access it, you just have to change the location. Okay, suppose your next database is in Tokyo. Okay, so you can just click on this location. Okay, and you can just go, you will be automatically redirected to that particular location data center, and then you can go to S3 and you can access the database. Okay, this is from the GUI. From the CLI.
Okay, but the user accessing the database, they are not aware which backend or which location that database is being picked from, right?
No, it's not required, right? Because user or IAM is not a region specific service. A user defined in Ohio can access
RDS is, right?
Pardon?
RDS is.
Yeah, exactly. RDS is, but suppose I have logged in with this user, right? Okay. So in order to access this, I can definitely go and change the location and I can access the database. From the GUI. From the CLI, you can just change. When you are giving AWS configure, there it is asking you the location name. Okay, so from the CLI, if you want to access a RDS which is deployed in some other location, change the location to the desired location and you can access the RDS.
Only one thing to confirm, when you say in case of any natural calamity, if region goes down, so that data will be replicated to all the regions within Asia Pacific, or if it is, I just want to understand that concept. Like if region goes down, your data will be replicated to all the other regions.
Depending on the replication scenario which AWS has configured. In a general scenario, what we have seen is that for APAC region, if a particular region goes down, the data gets flowed within the APAC region only.
Like in Azure, we have a provision where we can define if it is data center specific, zone specific, or region specific. So
here also in AWS also you can specify that. So I will show you once I will define an RDS. There is an option, though I cannot configure it because we are using a free tier. Okay, so if you have a subscription purchase, then you can actually define the replication as cross availability zone replication or within the availability zone replication. So if you are selecting cross availability zone replication, your database can be, primary database can be in Mumbai and your secondary database can be in Europe.
Okay.
That totally depends on it. Like in Azure also, can you actually tell me where the actual data is lying?
No.
You cannot, right? It's only Azure and Microsoft knows.
Where we are doing the configurations when we are having the instance, we are defining if it's going to be zone redundant or if it's going to be like
Exactly.
region
Geo redundant
Yeah.
or zone redundant or region redundant, right? So in that respect, like when you are giving a zone redundant, that means Azure is storing that particular database within the same zone, which is actually created at the time of declaring the database.
Yeah.
So at the time of declaring the database, if you have created South India or maybe Central India, so your primary database and the replica database, and you have selected zone replication, it will be within the same zone where your current database is lying.
Exactly, with the same region and different availability zones.
Same region and different availability zone. So maybe your primary database can be in South India and your secondary database can be in Central India, because those are two different availability zones. Okay. But if you are selecting geo redundant, then you don't know where the database is actually lying. Your primary database can be in South India and your secondary database can be in Europe.
Yeah, correct.
And based on the redundancy that you are selecting, you are paying the price. Right? Based on the redundancy that you are selecting, you are actually paying the price for that particular instance. So similar thing is actually happening for AWS as well. Here the concept is something different. In Azure we call it as zone redundant or geo redundant. Here we call it as availability zones or cross replication availability zones. So once we have
talked about EC2, in that case, like in RDS, I know there's an option to enable geo replication within the same zone or across the within the same region or across the region. But what about EC2 instance? Let's say if my EC2 instance, I want to enable the redundancy for that.
So in the EC2 instance, there is a concept of auto scaling. Okay.
Okay.
So in the when we will configure the auto scaling, you will be having an option that the means once the primary is down, from which region the secondary auto scaled instance will run. So you can select the region of the auto scaled instance. You can select it within the same region, or maybe you can select it within a different region.
Got it. Thanks.
That totally depends on the nature of the auto scaling that you are doing, whether you are doing a horizontal auto scaling or you are doing a vertical auto scaling. So that part we will be coming when we will be discussing about auto scaling. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Okay. So in order to work with RDS, let's start with RDS.
Abhijit.
Yeah.
Sorry to one more thing.
Yeah.
We have learned about CLI mode, how to get into CLI mode, how to install and all these things. There is another mode in programmatic part. This is called SDK mode. Is it for development?
This is for development. This is for development.
It's development.
Yeah.
Right?
So, suppose you know that all those instances that we are creating in GUI, those instances we can also create via the GitHub. Right?
Okay.
You can create it via the GitHub. You can create it via the Dockers with the help of Terraform, Ansible, Jenkins. You can actually create it.
Understood.
Yeah. Okay. So let me give you an idea. Like in case of, I think yesterday someone was asking about licenses. So here, when I will be showing you relational database, you will be having some idea. Maybe will get clear once we will be discussing about RDS. So in order to define an RDS, just click on RDS and then go to create dashboard, create database. Okay. Now once we click on create database, first is the database creation mode. Okay, the database creation method. There are two methods of database creation. One is a standard create, another is an easy create. Okay. Now what is standard create and what is easy create? Easy create will not give you any option of doing the configuration, apart from there are certain configurations which is needed, you will only be having option of configuring those. So those who have installed software in your Windows machine, the MSI package that you get, there are three types of installation that can be done. One is an easy installation, another is a custom installation. In custom installation, you can have an option of selecting in which drive, in which folder that particular software will get installed. But in easy installation, by default, a predefined path is defined in the MSI package, and it gets installed in that packet, in that path only. So standard create and easy create is more or less the same. This is easy installation. There will be very few things which you can define. You can see, you can only define the DB instance size. You can only define the database name and the username. Okay. So there is no option of whether whether you want to, if you want to create a backup plan, or maybe if you want to create an availability zone, a replication, whether you want to create a redundancy, whether you want to create an auto scaling. No option is there in case of easy create. Okay. But in case of standard create, once I click on standard create and I scroll down, you can see that there are lots of other options which has come up now. Okay. Now, once we go for standard create, these are the database engines with the help of which you can actually create the RDS instances. Okay. So we have Amazon Aurora, we have MySQL, MariaDB, PostgreSQL, Oracle, and Microsoft SQL Server. Okay. If you select Oracle, so if you select Oracle, Oracle is having two type of versions. One is Oracle Enterprise Edition, another is Oracle Standard Edition 2. In case of Oracle Enterprise Edition, you have to carry your own licenses. Okay. So you can install the software on that particular EC2 instance, on that EC2 server, and then you have to carry your own licenses in case of Oracle Enterprise. Whereas in case of Oracle Standard, you can use the license which is provided by AWS. Okay. But definitely in case of Oracle Standard, the pricing and everything will be definitely high, because the license AWS will be providing will not be providing you free of cost. They will be charging you for the license. Okay.
The version of the databases will always be the latest one on this.
Like in case of Oracle, you can select the version. Okay. So it ends with Oracle 19, which is the latest version, and it starts with Oracle 12.1. Okay. Similarly, in case of SQL Server also, you have SQL Server Express Edition. This can be by default taken from AWS. SQL Server Web Edition and SQL Server Express Edition can be taken from AWS. But for SQL Server Standard Edition and SQL Server Enterprise Edition, you have to carry your own licenses. For SQL Server, it starts with SQL Server 2012 and it ends on SQL Server 2019. Okay. Now, since we are using a free tier, we don't have access to all, because all those things will be chargeable. Remember what you select. Remember what you select, because don't forget that you have your debit card and credit card connected with this account. Anything you create which is beyond the free tier, you will be charged from your credit card. Okay. And then don't tell me, Abhijit, I have been charged in the credit card. So be very, very particular about what you select. Only select those instances or only select those services which is available free in free tier. Okay. So for free tier,
before getting charged, OTP will come, right?
No, the problem is that once you create an instance, the charge actually reflects within 48 hours. Okay. So there is a by default value which has been provided to you. Okay. So AWS value is 10,500 rupees per month for next 12 months. Okay. And once you go beyond 10,500 rupees and you have used some instances which is beyond free tier, AWS will not notify you, but AWS will charge it from your credit card. Okay. You will only get the notification once the charge is done. Okay. So we will be using MySQL as one of the relational database which we will be configuring. Okay. MySQL also is having a community version as well as it's also having an enterprise version. But MySQL enterprise version is not available in case of RDS instance. If you want to use your MySQL enterprise version, you can actually create an custom AMI package. Okay, so we will discuss about AMI packages when we will be discussing EC2. You can upload that package is in one of the storage account in one of the S3 buckets, and then can attach that S3 bucket and can install that MySQL version. But for free tier, we can only use MySQL community version. The MySQL community version starts from 5.6 and it ends on 8.0.2.5. This is the latest version. Next comes
Abhijit, how can we know that what comes under the free tier only?
I'm telling you. Okay. Now, once you select this particular version, next comes the templates. Okay. So you have three templates currently. One is in production, one is in dev test, another is in free tier. Okay. Now, if you have already tested your database and you want to deploy your database directly in production, you can select production, and likewise you can see that this database instances, that is the DB instance class, that is the EC2 which will be deployed for you, you will be having maximum number of EC2 with 256 gig of RAM with a network IOPS or network bandwidth of 19,000 Mbps. Okay. But similarly, in case of dev test, if you select dev test, your instance size will go from 8 GB of RAM to 256 gig of RAM with 19,000 Mbps. Okay. And you will be having an option of selecting standard class, memory optimized class, and burstable class. I will come up to this within few minutes. Okay. So here is an option of free tier. In free tier, we only get a EC2 instance of T2 EC2 instance, which is having 1 GB of RAM, okay, and one processor. So once you select a free tier, you can see that these two options are actually disabled. The standard class and memory optimized class are disabled. You can only get a T2 micro, and rest everything is disabled. Okay. So always try to select a free tier instance. Going forward, any services that you deploy in AWS will be having these templates like production, dev test, and free tier. I will recommend that you choose free tier only. Apart from that, you can navigate to aws.amazon.com and you can search for free tier. And in free tier, you will be seeing what are the things that you will be getting. In free tier, for a SQL database or for any database, you get 7,500 hours of accessibility. After 7,500 hours, you will be charged based on per hour. Okay. So this is the default free tier accessibility that has been given by AWS. Okay. So let's select let's select free tier. Okay. Let's give the database name as, suppose we want to create a database for a e-commerce site. Let's give a database name as e-commerce. Okay. The credentials as admin. Okay. You can auto generate the password. That's not an issue. Or you can define your own password. Okay. This is your server which will be created. So you will be getting one virtual CPU and 1 gig of RAM to provision your database. By default, you will be getting a general SSD. Now there are many other SSDs which are there. Okay. Depending on the IOPS that you want, the read-write operations that you want, you can select the database. Okay. If you go to general purpose, it will be maximum 20 GB. If you go for provisioned IOPS, you can go from 100 GB, you can go to 16 GB, 16 terabyte. Okay. If you are selecting magnetic, you can go from 5 GB to maximum of 3 GB. Okay. And high allocated storage may improve IOPS operation. So for free tier, we will be only using general purpose where it will be 20 GB. Now, if you don't select this option, enable storage auto scaling. Now, since in RDS, I already told you that you will not be finding any EC2 instance in your EC2 console, but you want to create an high availability and a scaling feature, right? So in that case, if you select enable storage auto scaling, it will give you it will create a similar storage, like the primary will be having a 20 GB of storage. Okay. Once a minute, guys. বল হ্যাঁ দাঁড়া 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 আমার ট্রেনিং চলছে বাবু দাঁড়া একটু খুলে দাও sorry for the interruption, guys. So as I was telling, so if you are enabling this feature of enable storage auto scaling, what it will do is that, let me go to the annotation mode. This is your primary server, the primary EC2 instance, which is having a 20 GB of space. Okay, which is having a 20 GB of space. If you are enabling this auto scaling option, by default, once this database will be provisioned, a similar server T21 micro server with a 1 vCPU and 1 GB of RAM and 20 GB of storage will be automatically defined in same availability zone. It will be not cross availability zone. The reason behind this, in free tier, we don't have availability zone option for multiple AZ deployment. You can see, do not create a standby instance. So we don't have option of creating multiple AZ deployment in case of free tier. In production or in dev test, you can definitely select the availability zones or multiple availability zones. So here, if you enable this on the same availability zone, it will create another instance with a 20 GB of space, and this 20 GB of space will be having a maximum threshold to increase to 1000 GB. Okay, this is where it is defined. Okay, you can define 1000 GB and you can go up to 16 TB. That means,
so is it not defined the vertical scaling of that
exactly. This is the vertical scaling of the hard disk. So I will not go deep into this because this I will already cover. I will cover it in S3, but I will cover it in auto scaling. But I will just give you an idea. There are two types of auto scaling which is there. One is a horizontal scaling. Horizontal scaling, what happens? Suppose if you want to create a horizontal scaling of an EC2 instance, and you say that this EC2 instance needs 4 auto scaling instances. That means 4 auto scaling instances, maximum 4 and minimum 2. That means once this EC2 instance is provided, by default same configuration will be taken and there will be another 2 instances which will be automatically provisioned. Okay, now if this particular instance goes down, this second instance starts up, there will be another instance which will be provided, and likewise it will provision instances up to maximum 4. Okay, this is known as horizontal scaling, which is actually used in case of EC2 instances, but in databases we don't have horizontal scaling concept. In databases we have concept of vertical scaling. That means suppose you have created a 20 GB of storage and now your storage space is getting over, so you can define a threshold. Suppose if you want that after 75% of your storage space is over, automatically the auto scaling will vertically scale another hard disk of 20 GB. Okay. So likewise, it will create hard disk up to 1000 GB or 16 TB or 16 TB. This is the maximum value you can set. Is it clear? Okay. So better we don't take any risk. We will stop this enable auto storage auto scaling option, because otherwise we will be charged. Okay. Second is you have to define your network. Okay. Virtual private VPC is virtual private cloud. You have to define your network. Once you create any EC2 instance, by default a network is automatically provisioned for that EC2 instance, which is known as default. Now, if you want to define your own network subnets, there is an option of creating a new VPC. Okay. So think of a scenario. Suppose you want to create this RDS instance and you want to migrate all the database which is present in your on-premise to cloud. Okay. So in that respect, you have to create a custom VPC, create a VPN connection with your on-premise environment, and then there is a service which is there in AWS which is known as DMS, that is Database Migration Service. With the help of that, you can migrate all your data from on-prem to cloud. Okay. So we will be discussing about DMS, but I cannot show you a on-premise migration, but definitely I will show you how to migrate one database into another database. Okay, within the same instance. Now, if you want to create a own VPC, own subnet, you just have to click on create new VPC and it will open a new console where you can create your own VPC. Remember, once you create a VPC, you cannot change the VPC, because by default those networks information are stored in the relational database information database. So relational database by default creates our own database which stores all these informations. What is the amount of server that you are creating? What is the configuration of the server? What is the storage that you are declaring? What is the VPC that you have declared? Everything is stored there and you cannot edit that particular database. Okay. Similarly, for subnet group, by default, once you are adding a particular EC2 instance, a subnet group by default will be created, or you can create your own subnet based on the VPC created out here. Okay. Now, by default, database should not have public access, right? As per security guidelines, you cannot give a public access to the database. You don't want people from the internet to access your database. But since in the event of practical, in the event of showing you how a database works, we will provide him the we will provide him the public access. Otherwise, we will be unable to connect. Okay. Security, VPC security group or a virtual private cloud security group is a kind of a virtual firewall where we can define what are the ports or what are the policies with the help of which the network traffic will go out and come in. Okay. So by default, you can create your own VPC. So VPC, if you have other VPCs created, you will see the list of all the VPCs out here. And if you don't have any VPC created, so by default, it will show you default. Okay. In the availability zone, you have a preference to select. These are the 3 availability zones which are currently given as a free tier access. Okay. You can select any one of the availability zone. Okay. So suppose AP Northeast 1A. So if I go to AP Northeast 1A, that means it will be declared 1A. It will be declared in either in Seoul, or sorry, it will be declared in 3-2 Northeast 1. Yeah, it will be declared in Tokyo, because we have selected the location as Tokyo and we have these 3 availability zones which are available in Tokyo. So if you select this location in any other, maybe North Virginia, you will be able to see the availability zones which are available in North Virginia. Okay. In the additional configuration, by default, Oracle by default, if I'm not sure, but I think Oracle by default port number is 1521. Okay. For MySQL, the default port number is 3306. You can use the default port number or you can change the port number. Okay. So the port number I have changed it to 3305. Okay. Then the type of database authentication that is there. So you can have a simple password authentication. Okay. You can also give an access to this database to a particular IAM user. Okay. With the help of the user's IAM password and access key and secret key, he can access this database. Or you can also you can select Kerberos authentication. Okay. Kerberos authentication is not part of the solution associate training. That's a part of solution architect professional training. But if time persists, I will definitely touch base on how to what is Kerberos and how to work on it. So currently we will go with password authentication. Okay. Now, if you want to create additional configurations, here is the database name that you can create. Okay, initial database name. You can create automatic backup, enable automatic backup. By default, the retention period starts from 0 days and maximum retention periods can be 35 days. Okay, so the retention period means if you want to store this particular database into some S3 bucket, how many days that particular database will be stored in the S3 bucket. That is the number of days that you can store it in a S3 bucket. Okay. Now backup window, you can actually schedule it. Currently there is no preference. If you select window, there will be preference when to start the backup and what will be the duration of the backup. Okay. You can create the start time, you can create the duration of the backup. We are not doing anything in this. With enable, we can also do a database monitoring with the help of CloudWatch, CloudTrail. There are other services in AWS. We can create a monitoring of the database. Okay, and with the help of those CloudWatch and CloudTrail, we can get audit log, error logs, general logs, or slow query logs. Okay, we are not enabling it. Second is maintenance. Enable auto minor version upgrade. Now auto minor version upgrade means, suppose you have created an RDS database with Oracle 19. You have Oracle 19.1. Okay, and you have an on-premise database with Oracle 19.0.7, which is just an old version, just n-1 version. Okay, so if there is no much architectural changes that has been done between these two versions, any minor version upgrade, RDS will automatically take care of it. You don't have to worry about any minor version upgrade. RDS will automatically take care of any minor version upgrade unless and until it's a major version. Like your on-premise environment is using Oracle 12 and you are deploying an RDS in Oracle 19, then there will be compatibility issues that you have to take care by yourself. If there is any minor upgrade versions, minor version changes, RDS will automatically take care of that. Okay. Last is deletion.
If it's enterprise, as you mentioned, then we have to provide the license. In that case, what will happen?
In that case, you have to select the same version which is there in your on-premise.
In that case, AWS will not take any responsibility, right? For
No. A major version upgrade, AWS will not take any responsibility. And even for enterprise version, you are carrying your own license. So you know what is the version that you are having, and you know what is the version that needs to be deployed in RDS in AWS.
Vijay,
Yeah.
if you could slightly scroll up, you will see that granularity is there for 60 seconds. It is like what it is like.
Yeah, if if you enable the enhanced monitoring, there is a granularity of 60 seconds. So it can
Yeah,
start
yeah,
with 1 second and it can start with 60 seconds. So granularity means once you enable this particular monitoring, CloudWatch or
Mhm.
CloudTrail, whichever you will configure,
Right.
this will
Right.
take the logs for every 60 seconds.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Got it.
And this is the last option, enable deletion protection. So you can just enable this so that anyone, though having a RDS full access permission, cannot delete the database unless and until it is a database owner. If the database owner wants to delete it, no enable deletion protection will prevent it. Then you have to create custom policies with the help of which you can deny deletion of databases. Okay. Now, once that is done, click on create database. So click on create database. So by default, this database in a general scenario, it takes around 15 to 20 minutes for the provisioning to complete. Okay. Once the provision is complete, if you click on this database, you will find the current status of the database, number one. So you can see that the current status of the database is creating. Once the creation is complete, okay, you can find the endpoint or the DNS FQDN details with the help of which you will be actually connecting the database. That means you will find the details of your ODBC connectivity. Okay. So we have to wait for that before till the time the database is getting provision. So since MySQL doesn't have any management console of its own, like if you go for SQL Server, we have SQL Management Console. If you go for Oracle, we have Oracle ID, with the help of which you can actually connect. Oracle Client we have, with the help of which actually connect. So we will be using a globally recognized client which actually supports all database of currently in world, all the renowned database of currently in the world. So I will be requesting you to download this. Go to this site dbeaver.io and download this universal database tool. So it will be available for Windows, Mac OS,